Before we begin, comment below which country you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. A 14-year-old boy stood in the middle of a crowded shopping plaza, his school bag ripped open, every single item inside dumped onto the floor for strangers to see because a man with a store and a loud voice decided that a child in worn-out shoes could only be there for one reason. He was wrong. And before that afternoon was over, that same man would be on his knees in front of the very crowd he had performed for, begging a boy he had just humiliated to spare everything he had built. If you love stories about dignity, quiet strength, and the kind of justice that hits hardest when it comes from the most unexpected place, sit back, find a comfortable seat, and stay with us until the very end. This is Lawal's story. The sun over Surulere hung low and orange by the time Lawal Adeyemi stepped off the yellow Danfo bus at the corner of Bode Thomas Street. He adjusted the strap of his faded navy school bag, the kind with one buckle already broken, repaired with a strip of black electrical tape, and joined the stream of afternoon foot traffic moving toward Adeyemi Plaza. He came here every Thursday, not because he had to. Not because his mother sent him on an errand or a teacher assigned him somewhere to be. He came because he liked it. The noise, the color, the smell of suya smoke drifting from the cart near the entrance, the way the whole place hummed like a living thing in the late afternoon heat. He would buy a small bag of popcorn from the woman near the east gate, walk slowly through the ground floor, look at things he had no intention of buying, and then take the bus home before dark. It was a simple ritual. It cost him almost nothing. Lawal was 14 years old. He was not tall for his age, not particularly broad-shouldered, not the kind of boy who drew attention when he walked into a room. He wore his school uniform gray trousers, a white shirt with a small ink stain near the second button that his mother had scrubbed at twice and still could not remove, and a pair of black shoes that had been resoled once already and were beginning to separate at the left toe. His hair was cut low and neat. His face was calm in the way that some people mistake for blankness, but it was not blankness. It was the face of a boy who had been taught very deliberately to observe before he spoke. His father had taught him that. Chief Emeka Adeyemi was not the kind of man who appeared in newspapers alongside his properties. He did not attend the kinds of parties where men in Agbada compared net worth over imported whiskey. He drove himself to the office 3 mornings a week in a car that, while expensive, was not the flashiest thing in any parking lot he entered. He had built his fortune quietly over 20 years, beginning with a single plot of land in Surulere that most people had dismissed as worthless, and ending with a portfolio that included 11 commercial properties across Lagos State. Adeyemi Plaza was his first, and his favorite. He had brought Lawal here for the first time when the boy was 10 years old on a quiet Saturday morning before any of the shops opened. They had walked the entire ground floor together, father and son, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Chief Emeka had stopped in the middle of the atrium, looked up at the 3 floors above them, and said without ceremony, "Someday this will matter to you, but only if you know how to treat people first." Lawal had not fully understood then. He was 10. He had nodded the way children nod when adults say things that sound important but feel far away. Now he was 14, and he still walked through the plaza in his school uniform, buying popcorn with his weekly allowance, 1,000 naira, no more, handed to him in a folded note every Monday morning by his father. Chief Emeka had been very clear about this arrangement. No driver to drop him off. No credit card tucked into the bag for emergencies. No special treatment from the plaza management, none of whom were told that the quiet boy in the gray school trousers was the owner's son. "The world will show you its real face when it thinks you have nothing," his father had told him once. "I want you to see that face, and I want you to remember it." Lawal had remembered. He pushed through the glass entrance doors of Adeyemi Plaza, and was immediately folded into the sound and warmth of the place generators humming behind the walls. Afro beats leaking from a speaker somewhere on the second floor, a woman arguing cheerfully with a shoe vendor over a price she had already decided to pay. The ground floor was lined with 32 shops: electronics, fabrics, phone accessories, a small pharmacy, a hair and beauty supply store, a stationery outlet, and near the east corridor, tucked between a phone repair kiosk and the stairwell, Mama Taiwo's bread stall. Mama Taiwo had been at that corner for 9 years. She was a wide, warm woman in her late 50s, always in a floral Ankara wrapper and a head tie that she retied approximately 4 times a day depending on her mood. She sold soft bread, chin-chin, groundnut, and on Fridays, puff-puff that people came from 2 streets away to buy. She knew most of the plaza's regular visitors by face, and she knew Lawal by name. Lawal. She raised her hand from behind the stall as he approached. "Thursday, boy. You're early today. School let out at 2, he said. He stopped at her stall, counted out 300 naira from his pocket, and pointed to a small bag of groundnut. She handed it over and tucked in an extra piece of chin-chin without being asked. "How is school?" "Fine, Ma. Fine," she repeated, with the tone of a woman who did not entirely believe him, but had decided not to push. "Go and look at your electronics. Don't let that Biodun man see you touching anything." It was a casual warning delivered the way Mama Taiwo delivered most things, as a small kindness dressed up as a joke. Lawal smiled, took his groundnut, and moved on. He did not go to Fashola Electronics immediately. He walked the full length of the ground floor first, as he always did, pausing at the stationery shop to look at a set of geometry instruments he had been considering for 2 weeks, then stopping near the pharmacy to read the handwritten price list taped to the window. These were not things he needed urgently. He was just looking. He liked to know what things cost. Eventually, he drifted toward Fashola Electronics. It occupied the corner unit at the far end of the ground floor, the largest shop on that level, with a glass front that ran floor to ceiling, and a display of phones, laptops, headphones, and accessories arranged with the aggressive neatness of a man who considered his shop a reflection of his own importance. A sign above the door in bold red letters, "Fashola Electronics Quality You Can Trust." Biodun Fashola had opened this shop 7 years ago with a loan and a great deal of ambition. He had worked hard in the early years, long hours, careful inventory prices that were fair enough to build a loyal customer base. But success for Biodun had not made him generous. It had made him loud. He wore embroidered kaftan shirts even on weekday afternoons, kept 3 staff members in matching polo shirts, and had developed a habit of standing in his doorway during slow hours with the posture of a man surveying a kingdom. He was in that posture now when Lawal stopped at the glass. The boy was not inside. He was simply standing on the other side of the glass looking at a pair of wireless earphones on the middle shelf, a black and gold model, the kind that came in a charging case shaped like a small egg. He had seen them 2 weeks ago and had been thinking about them since. They cost 14,000 naira. He had done the arithmetic. At 1,000 naira a week, it would take him 14 weeks to save enough, but his father had also told him that a boy who saves for 14 weeks for something learns its value in a way that a boy who is handed it immediately never does. So Lawal was looking. Not buying. Just looking. Inside the store, Biodun turned from the counter, saw the boy at the glass, and felt something shift in his expression, not anger yet, just suspicion. A boy in a worn uniform standing too long at the window. He watched, and his eyes went narrow and still. Lawal did not linger at the glass forever. He looked at the earphones for perhaps 2 more minutes, long enough to memorize the exact shape of the charging case, the way the gold trim caught the fluorescent light from inside the store, and then he moved on. He had come in today for something specific. His small battery-powered reading lamp had died 2 nights ago, mid-chapter, in a way that felt deeply unfair. He needed 2 AA batteries. That was all. He pushed open the door of Fashola Electronics and stepped inside. The shop smelled of plastic packaging and air conditioning, cool and slightly artificial, the kind of cold that felt earned rather than natural. 2 customers were already inside. A woman in a yellow blouse examining phone cases near the back wall, and an older man talking to one of Biodun's staff members about a laptop charger. Lawal moved to the accessories section near the side wall, found the batteries quickly, a pack of 4 Duracell AAs, 450 naira, and carried them to the counter near the front. Biodun was behind the counter. He looked at Lawal the way a man looks at something that does not belong in his space. Not yet with words, just with his eyes moving from the worn shoes to the ink-stained shirt, to the faded bag, to the face assembling a verdict before a single sentence had been exchanged. "What do you want?" he said. "Good afternoon, sir," Lawal said. He set the batteries on the counter. "Just these, please." Biodun did not reach for the batteries. He continued looking at the boy with the expression of a man who had already decided something and was now simply waiting to be proven right. He glanced toward the accessories section Lawal had just come from, then back at the bag hanging off the boy's left shoulder. "You were standing outside for a long time," Biodun said. "I was looking at the earphones, sir." "Looking," Biodun repeated. The word came out of his mouth with a particular texture, flat and disbelieving, like he was handling something wet. "Yes, sir." There was a pause. The woman in the yellow blouse had stopped examining phone cases. The staff member at the back had gone quiet. The air conditioning hummed. Biodun leaned forward slowly, both palms on the glass counter, and looked directly at Lawal. "Open your bag." Lawal blinked. "Sir, I said, open your bag." His voice was louder now, not quite a shout, but calibrated precisely to be heard by everyone in the store. "Before you came to this counter, you were in the accessories section, by yourself. Now open the bag so I can see what you brought with you to my counter." The color in Lawal's face did not change. His hands did not shake. He had inherited his father's stillness, that particular quality of a man who has learned that reacting quickly to provocation is a luxury the powerful can afford, and the wise cannot. He unzipped his bag slowly and placed it on the counter open side up. "Go ahead, sir," he said. Biodun came around the counter. He did not do it quietly. He did it with the energy of a performance, pulling back the main compartment, lifting out Lawal's textbooks one by one, dropping them on the counter with a series of flat thuds. A mathematics notebook, a literature anthology with a cracked spine, a pencil case, a folded printout of a school timetable, a small plastic container of shea butter his mother had insisted he carry. Each item placed on the counter like evidence. By now, every person in the store was watching. The woman in yellow had set down her phone case entirely. 2 more customers had come in from outside during the commotion and stopped just inside the doorway. A young man in a Fashola Electronics polo shirt stood near the back wall with his arms at his sides, watching his employer with an expression caught somewhere between discomfort and the learned habit of saying nothing. Biodun found nothing. He unzipped the small front pocket. A biro, a 10 naira coin, a folded receipt from a stationery shop. He checked the side mesh pocket. A half-empty bottle of water. He straightened up and stood there for a moment, looking at the open bag and its harmless contents spread across his glass counter, and Lawal watched him with the same calm, unbroken expression he had worn since the beginning. The store was very quiet. "It's not here," the young staff member near the back said almost involuntarily. He seemed to regret it the moment the words left his mouth. Biodun ignored him. He picked up the battery pack that Lawal had placed on the counter earlier, turned it over once, and set it back down. Then he looked at Lawal with an expression that was not quite embarrassment, because embarrassment would have required an acknowledgement that he had been wrong, but something harder. Something that had decided in the absence of evidence to simply choose a different form of attack. "You think this is a game?" Biodun said. You think you can come into my shop and touch my things and I won't notice? I didn't touch anything except the batteries, sir. Don't talk back to me." The volume had climbed again. He pointed toward the door. "Get out, leave the batteries, get your things and get out of my shop." "Sir, I came to buy—" "I said get out." The word bounced off the glass front of the store and out into the corridor. Outside, heads turned. Two women passing by slowed down to look. A man eating suya near the stairwell craned his neck. Lawal repacked his bag with steady hands. He put each item back in exactly the order it had been removed: textbooks, notebook, pencil case, the little container of shea butter. He zipped the main compartment, then the front pocket. He picked up his bag, slung it over his shoulder, and looked at Biodun one last time. He did not beg. He did not argue. He did not cry. He simply said very quietly, "I didn't take anything, sir." Biodun took one step forward, close enough that Lawal could smell the coffee on his breath, and said loudly enough for the small crowd that had now gathered just outside the glass front to hear, "Boys like you don't belong in places like this." Lawal turned and walked out. The gathered onlookers in the corridor parted to let him through, some watching with quiet sympathy, some with the blank neutrality of people who had calculated that involvement was not in their interest. Lawal walked past all of them without looking left or right, turned the corner near the stairwell, and sat down on the bottom step out of sight from the main corridor. He placed his bag on his knees. He opened it and took out the half-empty bottle of water and drank from it slowly. His hands were steady. His face was calm. But there was something behind his eyes, not tears, not anger, that looked very much like patience. The kind of patience that has been practiced so many times it no longer feels like an effort. The kind that knows without needing to be told that this is not how the story ends. 3 meters away, around the corner, a man in a neat, short-sleeved shirt stood near the entrance of the plaza with a leather folder tucked under his arm and a phone at his ear. He had arrived 4 minutes ago to collect the monthly rental payments from the ground-floor shops. He had been on his way to Fashola Electronics, the next name on his list, when the shouting started. He had stopped walking. Now he stood very still, looking at the boy sitting on the bottom step of the stairwell, and his expression had changed completely. Emeka Jr. knew that face. He had driven that boy to school twice when the family driver was sick. He had carried that boy on his back once through a flooded street during a rainstorm in 2019. He had sat across from that boy at the Adeyemi family dining table and been scolded gently by Chief Emeka for not eating enough rice. He looked from Lawal to the entrance of Fashola Electronics, then back at Lawal. Then he stepped away from the corridor, turned toward the plaza exit, raised his phone, and pressed dial. Emeka Jr. had barely raised the phone to his ear when Biodun stepped back out of Fashola Electronics. He came out the way a man comes out when he wants an audience, not rushing, but moving with the deliberate energy of someone who had decided the performance inside was not yet finished. He straightened his caftan at the collar, assessed the size of the corridor crowd, and turned toward the stairwell where Lawal still sat. "You're still here," he said. Lawal looked up but said nothing. "I told you to leave." The public voice again, the one that carried. 3 shop owners across the corridor appeared in their doorways. A woman with fabric samples stopped walking. The suya man near the stairwell put down his skewer. "I'm not inside your shop, sir," Lawal said quietly. "This is my plaza." It was a small slip, the kind anger loosens from a man's grip on accuracy, but nobody in that corridor was positioned to correct him, and he said it with enough confidence that it settled over the crowd like a fact. He stepped closer. "You think because nothing was found in the bag that makes you innocent, you come in here, you touch things you think nobody is watching. I only touched the batteries, sir. Don't interrupt me." His voice cracked upward. "Don't you dare interrupt me in my own building." From the far end of the corridor came Ngozi Fashola, her Ankara wrapper swishing fast. Someone, likely one of the polo shirt staff, had called her down from the second floor. She arrived beside her husband, looked at Lawal once, and her face arranged itself into an expression of magnificent contempt. "This is the one," she said. "This is the one." She looked the boy up and down, slow, deliberate, wanting him to feel every second of it. "You should be ashamed, coming into people's shops to steal. Does your mother know where you are?" "I didn't steal anything, Ma." "You didn't steal." She laughed, short, sharp, without warmth. "Biodun caught you." "He searched my bag and found nothing," Lawal said. "You can ask anyone who was inside." Ngozi turned briefly to a bystander nearby, a woman with a child on her hip, who gave a small non-committal shrug that helped nobody. Ngozi turned back, her patience gone. "You know what I'm tired of children like you, coming here every week, touching everything, buying nothing. You can't afford anything in this building." Lawal stayed quiet. "Answer me." "I buy groundnut from Mama Taiwo," he said. "Today I came for batteries." Ngozi took 2 steps forward, raised her right hand and slapped Lawal across the left side of his face. It was not a hard slap, but it was a public one. The sound cut through every other noise in the corridor and left behind a silence that lasted 3 full seconds. Then the crowd erupted in confused, overlapping noise. People stepped back, others leaned forward. A teenage girl near the pharmacy pressed her hand to her own cheek. An elderly man near the fabric shop shook his head once and looked away. A man near the back raised his phone, red recording light blinking. Lawal did not move, did not raise his hand to his face. He sat on the step, absorbed the moment, and looked at Ngozi with an expression that was still composed, not numb, not broken, but something that, if you looked long enough, resembled sorrow. Not for himself. For her. It was Mama Taiwo who moved first. She had been watching from her stall for 6 minutes, hands wrapped around the edge of her counter. When Ngozi's hand came down, she released the counter and walked firmly unhurried to the center of the corridor. "Ngozi." Her voice was low. It didn't need to be loud. "You just hit a child. Stay out of this, Taiwo. They searched his bag and found nothing. Everybody in that shop saw it." She looked around the gathered faces slowly. "And now, you hit him. For sitting on a step." Biodun stepped forward. "Old woman, I'm warning you." "You're warning me." Mama Taiwo's eyes found his and held. "I have watched you treat people badly in this building for years. Customers, children, the cleaners. I stayed quiet because I had a stall to keep." She paused. "But I'm watching it now, and I'm saying something." Biodun's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Get away from my section," he finally managed, voice slightly uneven, "before I have you removed." "Remove me then," she said, and did not move. The crowd had swelled past 30 now. Chief Okafor materialized from somewhere large, well-dressed irregular at Fashola Electronics, the kind of man who buys things he doesn't need to have conversations about what he can afford. He placed a hand on Biodun's shoulder. "Don't waste your time," Chief Okafor said, performing to the crowd. "These street children come here and cause problems. You did the right thing." He looked at Lawal with the flat dismissiveness of a man who had long stopped seeing school uniforms as something requiring his respect. "Go back where you came from, boy. This is not a place for you." Lawal looked at Chief Okafor, then at Biodun, then at the recording phone at the back of the crowd. He said nothing. Biodun, energized by Chief Okafor's support, turned to face the full corridor and raised his voice to its highest register. "I am calling security, and I am calling the police." He swept his arm in Lawal's direction. "This boy will be banned from this plaza permanently. I don't care who he is or where he comes from. If you steal in my building, there are consequences." The word "my" again. Nobody corrected it. Several people in the crowd nodded. A few looked uncertain. Mama Taiwo stood her ground jaw tight, watching Biodun with the expression of a woman filing everything she was witnessing into permanent memory. Lawal sat on the step, his bag on his knees, water bottle in his hand, the left side of his face still warm from the slap. His father's voice came to him quietly, the way it always did when the world showed him its real face. The world will show you its real face when it thinks you have nothing. I want you to see that face, and I want you to remember it. He was seeing it. He would remember it. Around the corner, near the plaza entrance, Emeka Jr. stood with his leather folder pressed to his chest and his phone held loosely at his side. His call had lasted less than 2 minutes. He was no longer looking at his watch. He was looking at the entrance. The corridor noise continued without him. Biodun was still talking to Chief Okafor, to the crowd, to anyone who would give him an ear, and his voice rose and fell in waves that Lawal had stopped tracking. From where the boy sat on the bottom step of the stairwell, the whole scene had taken on the quality of something happening slightly behind glass. Present, loud, real, but no longer able to reach him in the same way. He took another slow sip from his water bottle and looked down at his shoes. The left toe had separated a little more today. He had noticed it on the bus ride, over the way the rubber sole lifted slightly with each step, like a mouth opening to say something. He would need to tell his mother. She would suck her teeth and say she had warned him 2 weeks ago and she would be right. And then she would take the shoes to the cobbler on Adeniran Ogunsanya Street, who charged 300 naira per repair and always threw in a quick polish without being asked. These were the thoughts Lawal allowed himself. Small, specific, manageable. He had learned this from his father, too, though Chief Emeka had never put it into words directly. It was something Lawal had absorbed by watching the man operate. When things around him became loud and unruly, Chief Emeka went quiet. Not the quiet of a man retreating. The quiet of a man choosing where to place his attention while the storm moved through. Mama Taiwo appeared at the edge of the stairwell. She had detached herself from the confrontation, or perhaps Biodun had simply run out of things to say to her for the moment, and she came around the corner carrying a small bottle of cold Coke, the glass kind still sweating from the cooler. She sat down on the step beside Lawal without asking permission and held the bottle out. He looked at it. "I have water, Ma." "Water doesn't fix everything," she said. He took the Coke. He did not open it immediately, just held it in both hands and let the cold work against his palms. They sat together in the relative quiet of the stairwell, the corridor noise a muffled rumble around the corner. Mama Taiwo did not try to fill the silence with reassurance. She was not that kind of woman. She sat with her hands folded on her knees and her head tie slightly askew from the confrontation, and she let the silence be what it was. After a while, she said, "9 years I've had that stall." "I know, Ma." 9 years. You know how many times he has spoken to me like a person in 9 years. She held up 3 fingers. 3. Once, when he needed change for a customer and his shop was closed for stock taking. Once, when he thought I had a connection to the plaza management and wanted me to put in a good word. She paused. And once, when his wife was sick and he needed to borrow paracetamol. Lawal almost smiled. What happened the other times? He walks past me like I am part of the wall. Like this stall, this bread, these 9 years, none of it is real to him. She adjusted her head tie. You know what I have decided. People like Biodun, they don't see you because they are too busy looking at themselves. Everything is a mirror. You are only useful to them if you reflect something back that makes them feel big. Lawal turned the Coke bottle slowly in his hands. My father says something like that, he said. He says some people measure their height by pushing others down. Mama Taiwo looked at him sideways. Your father sounds like a wise man. He is, Lawal said. And then after a pause, he owns this plaza. The words came out quietly. Not as a threat, not as a weapon, just as a fact that had been sitting inside him since the moment Biodun first blocked him at the counter, pressing against the inside of his chest like a stone he was tired of carrying alone. He had not planned to say it. He had promised his father without being asked directly that he would not use it. But Mama Taiwo was not Biodun, and sometimes the truth needed one witness who was not the person living it. Mama Taiwo went very still. She turned to look at Lawal, fully, not a quick glance, but a long, searching look, the kind that moves across a person's face the way you read a document you want to be sure you have understood correctly. "What did you say?" she said. "My father, Chief Emeka Adeyemi." Lawal looked at her steadily. "He owns Adeyemi Plaza, has owned it since before I was born. He doesn't tell people. He doesn't put his photo anywhere. He just owns it." Mama Taiwo's mouth opened slightly. "He makes me come here in my school uniform," Lawal continued. "Bus fare, 1,000 naira a week. No driver, no phone calls to the management to say I'm coming. He wants me to know what it feels like to be nobody." He looked down at the separated sole of his left shoe. "He says the world shows you its real face when it thinks you have nothing. He wants me to see the faces." The corridor noise peaked briefly, Biodun's voice climbing again over some new objection from somewhere and then settled back. Mama Taiwo sat very still for a long moment. Then she pressed both hands flat on her knees, looked straight ahead at the wall across the stairwell, and exhaled slowly through her nose. "Lord, have mercy," she said softly. Not dramatically, just quietly, with the weight of a woman doing arithmetic in her head and arriving at a number she had not expected. Lawal opened the Coke. He drank half of it in one go, the cold sweetness cutting through the afternoon heat, and then held the bottle with both hands again. "Please, don't say anything," he said. "I wasn't supposed to tell anyone, it's just—" He paused, searching for the right shape of it. "I needed someone else to know, so it didn't just sit inside me." Mama Taiwo nodded. "I won't say a word." She picked an invisible thread from her wrapper. "But I'll tell you this. Whatever is coming, and something is coming, I can feel it in my feet the way I feel rain. I want to be standing right here when it arrives." From around the corner came the sound of Biodun's voice at full volume, again addressing the corridor with new energy, announcing that the police had been called and that the boy would be removed from the premises and that he would personally ensure no one of this type was permitted entry to his building again. Lawal heard it all. He finished the Coke, set the empty bottle neatly against the wall beside him, picked up his water bottle, re-zipped the front pocket of his bag with calm, practiced hands. And then he looked toward the plaza entrance, the wide glass doors at the far end of the ground floor corridor, beyond the crowd, beyond Biodun, beyond all of it. Outside, the afternoon light had changed. The orange had deepened into something closer to amber, long and low across the tiled forecourt of the plaza. The bougainvillea along the outer wall was going gold at the edges, and at the far end of the forecourt, just visible through the glass, 3 black SUVs had turned off Bode Thomas Street and were moving slowly, very slowly, toward the plaza entrance. The 3 black Toyota Land Cruisers moved through the forecourt of Adeyemi Plaza with the unhurried certainty of vehicles that had never once been asked to hurry. They did not speed. They did not honk. They simply rolled forward across the tiled surface in a single line, the afternoon sun catching their bonnets in 3 successive flashes of gold, and pulled into the reserved parking bays directly in front of the main entrance, the ones marked with small white signs that read "Management Only," and that every regular visitor to the plaza had learned over the years to leave alone without ever being told why. The engines went quiet, one after the other. Nobody got out immediately. That pause, 10 seconds, perhaps 15, was its own kind of statement. Long enough for the people gathered near the entrance to notice. Long enough for word to move through the corridor crowd the way word always moves through crowds, without coordination, without announcement, simply passing from one set of eyes to the next until everyone was looking in the same direction. Biodun was mid-sentence when Chief Okafor touched his arm. He turned, saw the vehicles. His sentence ended without a full stop. The front passenger door of the lead SUV opened first. A security man in a plain dark uniform stepped out, scanned the forecourt once, and moved to the rear door. He opened it and stepped back. 3 more men in identical dark uniforms had emerged from the second and third vehicles and arranged themselves in a loose formation without any visible signal between them, the practiced, unhurried choreography of people who have done this many times. Then, Chief Emeka Adeyemi stepped out. He was not a dramatically large man. He was not the kind of figure whose physical size commanded a room. He was medium height, slightly broad across the shoulders, with the settled, unhurried posture of a man who had not needed to prove anything with his body for a very long time. He wore a traditional Yoruba agbada, deep burgundy, embroidered at the collar, and cuffs with gold thread that caught the late afternoon light without announcing itself. His shoes were plain black leather recently polished. His watch was visible at the left wrist when he adjusted his sleeve. Not a loud watch, not the kind of thing designed to be noticed, but the kind that if you happened to know what you were looking at, told you everything you needed to know. Emeka Jr. was already at his side, the leather folder now open, speaking quietly close to the chief's ear. Chief Emeka listened without stopping walking. He nodded once. His face was composed, not cold, not angry, but with the particular stillness of a man who has received information that has confirmed something he already suspected and has already decided how he will respond. He crossed the forecourt. The plaza's 2 security guards, both employees of Adeyemi Properties, though neither Biodun nor most of the shop tenants had ever made that connection, snapped to attention as Chief Emeka passed through the main entrance doors. One of them reached forward to hold the door. Chief Emeka nodded at him by name. Segun. "Good evening, sir," Segun said, and something in the way he said it, the slight straightening of the spine, the particular weight of the sir sent a ripple of attention through the nearest edge of the crowd. Chief Emeka walked into the ground floor corridor, and the crowd parted. Not because anyone announced who he was, not because his security team cleared a path, though they moved with him. The crowd parted the way crowds part when something changes in the atmosphere of a space, when the air pressure shifts in a way that bypasses rational thought and registers somewhere older and more instinctive. People stepped back. People turned. People who had been recording on their phones lowered them slightly, then raised them again when they realized they did not want to miss whatever was about to happen. Biodun saw him coming and did not know what he was seeing. He saw a well-dressed man walking toward him with calm purpose, trailing security personnel, and a man with a folder. He saw the security guards at the entrance standing differently than they had 5 minutes ago. He saw the crowd moving. He made a rapid, incorrect calculation, the kind a man makes when he is already performing and cannot stop mid-performance to recalibrate, and assumed this was someone important who had come to shop, or perhaps a government official who had heard the disturbance. He straightened his caftan. He prepared his face into the expression he reserved for customers of visible means. Chief Emeka did not look at Biodun. He walked past him, past Mama Taiwo's stall around the corner of the stairwell, and stopped in front of Lawal. The boy looked up. For one moment, just one something moved across Lawal's face that was not a composure. Not quite. It was the particular expression of a child who has been holding himself together with great effort for a long time, and who upon seeing a trusted face must perform the additional effort of continuing to hold. His jaw tightened once, then relaxed. Chief Emeka crouched down so that he was at eye level with his son. "Are you all right?" he said. His voice was low. It was not performing for anyone. "Yes, sir," Lawal said. Chief Emeka looked at his son's face for a long moment, the way a father looks when he is checking something that words cannot fully answer. He reached out and placed his right hand on the boy's shoulder briefly firmly. Then he stood. He turned. The corridor was completely silent. Biodun had followed at a distance, with Chief Okafor slightly behind him, and now stood approximately 4 meters away, flanked by Ngozi, who had arrived back at his side without anyone noticing exactly when. The crowd had reformed in a wide semicircle around the stairwell entrance, 50 people at minimum pressed close, but not closing in the collective stillness of an audience that understands it, is watching something that will not be repeated. Biodun looked from Chief Emeka to Lawal and back again. His face was moving through calculations at visible speed. "Good evening," he said carefully. "Sir, I don't know if you heard, but there was an incident earlier with this boy. I heard Chief Emeka said. And I want to assure you that we handled it appropriately. This is a place of business, and we have to protect our—" "Biodun Fashola," Chief Emeka said. The use of the full name stopped everything. "Yes, sir. How long have you been renting from me?" The question landed in the silence like a stone in still water. Biodun's mouth stayed open around the shape of a word he had not yet formed. He looked at Emeka Jr., who was standing slightly behind Chief Emeka, with the leather folder open, and his expression professionally neutral. He looked at the security team. He looked at the plaza guards. His face, in the space of 4 seconds, went through the full passage confusion calculation realization, and then something that was not quite any single emotion, but a compound of all of them arriving at once. "Sir," he said. His voice had lost its register entirely. "Sir, I are you." 7 years, Emeka Jr. said from behind the folder. His voice was level and clear. "Fashola Electronics, Unit G01, ground floor, Adeyemi Plaza. 7 years, 2 months, and 16 days. The crowd did not make a sound. Ngozi's hand found Biodun's arm. Chief Okafor, 3 steps behind, had gone completely still. Mama Taiwo stood at the edge of the semicircle with her arms folded and her head tie slightly crooked and her face carrying an expression that was equal parts vindication and compassion, because she was that kind of woman even now. Biodun looked at Lawal. Lawal looked back at him with the same steady, unbroken expression he had worn since the first moment Biodun had blocked him at the counter. The same eyes, the same stillness. Nothing added. Nothing removed. "Boys like you don't belong in places like this." The words were still in the air between them, though nobody had spoken them aloud again. They did not need to be. Everyone present could feel the weight of them and what it meant now that they had ever been said. The silence in the corridor lasted long enough to become its own kind of pressure. Then Emeka Jr. stepped forward. He did it without being asked, the way a man steps forward when he has been waiting for this moment, when he has had the words organized in his mind since the phone call ended, and has simply been waiting for the right silence to place them into. He stood beside Chief Emeka, opened the leather folder, and turned to face the gathered crowd with the calm authority of a man who has delivered difficult news before, and has learned that clarity is a mercy. "My name is Chukwuemeka Obi," he said. "I am the personal assistant and property manager for Chief Emeka Adeyemi of Adeyemi Properties Limited." He paused. Let the name register. Chief Adeyemi is the sole owner of Adeyemi Plaza, this building, this land, every unit on every floor, including Unit G01, currently occupied by Fashola Electronics. He looked at Biodun directly. "The boy you accused of theft this afternoon, searched in public, had struck and threatened to have arrested, is Chief Adeyemi's son, his only son, Lawal Adeyemi." Emeka Jr. closed the folder. The crowd absorbed this in stages. First came the low sound, the compressed collective exhale of 50 people processing a fact that had just rearranged everything. Then the murmuring, rising in overlapping fragments, his son, the owner's son, Adeyemi Plaza, that boy. And then from somewhere near the back, a single woman's voice cutting cleanly through all of it, God punish wickedness. Biodun had not moved. He stood in the same position he had been standing in when the question landed slightly forward on his left foot. His kaftan shirt creased at the stomach from where his hands had twisted the fabric without his noticing. Ngozi's hand was still on his arm, but she was no longer gripping it the way a wife grips a husband. She was holding it the way a person holds something they are not sure they should let go of. "Sir." Biodun's voice had been reduced to something barely above a whisper. "Sir, I didn't know. I swear on my life I had no idea that—" "I know you didn't," Chief Emeka said. "It was the mildness of it that made it worse." If he had shouted, if his voice had carried heat or contempt, or the performative anger that Biodun himself had deployed so freely an hour ago, it would have been easier to receive. Anger can be argued with. Mildness of this particular kind cannot. It arrives like a closed door. "You didn't know," Chief Emeka continued, "because my son walks through this building the same way every other child walks through it, in his school uniform, with his allowance in his pocket, by design." He looked at Lawal briefly, then back at Biodun. That was the point, so that people would treat him the way they treat everyone else, so that he would see, and I would see what this building looks like to the people who don't own it. He paused. "And now I have seen." Chief Okafor, who had been slowly reducing his physical footprint in the crowd for the past 2 minutes, a gradual rearward drift that he perhaps hoped nobody was tracking, made the mistake of attempting one final step backward. The movement caught Chief Emeka's eye. "Chief Okafor," he said. The man stopped. "I see you. We will speak about your outstanding rental arrears separately. Emeka will contact you tomorrow morning." Chief Emeka's tone did not change. Still level, still quiet, the same temperature throughout. "Do not leave the city." Chief Okafor opened his mouth, closed it, gave a small stiff nod that carried the full weight of a man who has just understood the dimensions of the hole he is standing in. Ngozi released Biodun's arm. She stepped forward 1 step too, and then her legs seemed to lose their certainty and she stopped, one hand pressed to her mouth. Her eyes were moving between Lawal and Chief Emeka and the crowd of phones and faces, and she had the expression of a woman watching a wave arrive that she had thought until 30 seconds ago was still somewhere out at sea. "Please," she said. The word came out cracked. "Please, sir, I am begging you. We have been in this plaza 7 years. 7 years we have paid every month. My children go to school from this shop. Please?" "Ngozi." Chief Emeka said her name once quietly, and she stopped. He turned to Lawal. "Come," he said. Lawal stood. He picked up his bag, slung it over his shoulder, and walked to his father's side. He stood there in his gray school trousers and his ink-stained white shirt, and his shoes with the separated left sole beside a man in a gold-embroidered burgundy agbada, and the contrast was so complete, so deliberately assembled, that several people in the crowd would later say it was the image that stayed with them longest. Not the confrontation, not the reveal, not Biodun on his knees, just that a boy in a worn uniform standing beside his father, looking completely unbothered by the difference between them. Chief Emeka addressed the corridor. "My son told me what happened here today. He was accused without evidence. His belongings were searched and humiliated in front of customers. He was struck." He let the last word stand alone for a moment. "He sat on those steps for over an hour and said nothing, because I raised him to absorb what the world shows him and remember it." He looked at Biodun. "He remembered it, and now so will I." Biodun's knees buckled. It happened in the way these things happen, not a dramatic collapse, but a slow, surrendering descent, the knees finding the floor before the mind had finished deciding whether to allow it. He knelt on the tiled floor of the corridor he had claimed as his own for 7 years and pressed both hands flat against it and bowed his head. "Please, sir," he said to the floor, "please, I am sorry. I am deeply sorry. I will do anything, please." The crowd was silent. Lawal looked at his father. Chief Emeka gave the smallest nod, not a command, just a permission. Lawal took one step forward. He looked at Biodun's bowed head. He looked at Ngozi, still standing with her hand over her mouth, her eyes red. "Get up," Lawal said. His voice was quiet and direct, not cruel, not triumphant. Biodun raised his head. "I don't want your shop," Lawal said. "I don't want you to lose everything. I just—" He stopped, found the words. "I want you to never do this to another child again. Any child. Not because you're afraid of who their father might be, because it's wrong." The corridor received this in silence. Then Mama Taiwo, from the edge of the semicircle, began to clap. Slowly, at first. Then the person beside her joined. Then two more. Then the sound spread outward through the crowd the way warmth spreads gradually. Then all at once until the entire corridor was filled with it bouncing off the glass storefronts and the tiled floors, and the 3 floors of Adeyemi Plaza above them, the building that had always belonged to this quiet man and his quiet son, and that today had finally said so out loud. Emeka Jr. opened the folder again. He removed a document and held it in both hands, face out, so that Biodun, still on his knees, could see it clearly. "The tenancy agreement for Unit G01, Emeka Jr. said. Clause 14, subsection 3. Termination of lease upon conduct detrimental to the safety, dignity, or well-being of any visitor to the premises." He looked down at Biodun without expression. "Mr. Fashola, Chief Adeyemi would like a word about your lease." Emeka Jr. read the clause a second time. Not because anyone had failed to hear it the first time, but because some things need to be said twice, once to inform, and once to confirm that everyone present understands. There will be no confusion about what was said and when and in front of how many witnesses. He read it clearly at the same measured pace, and when he finished, he lowered the document and waited. Biodun was still on his knees. He had not moved since Lawal told him to get up, which was a strange inversion that nobody in the corridor had missed. The boy had offered him dignity, and he had not taken it. Perhaps he could not. Perhaps the distance between the floor and standing felt in that moment too great to cross without knowing what waited for him on the other side. Chief Emeka looked at Emeka Jr. "Read the termination clause." Emeka Jr. turned one page. "Upon confirmation of conduct in violation of Clause 14, subsection 3, the landlord reserves the right to terminate the tenancy agreement with 30 days written notice, forfeiting the security deposit in full with no right of appeal or renewal." He lowered the document again. Biodun's head came up slowly. "Sir?" His voice was stripped of every register it had possessed an hour ago, the performance, the volume, the confidence. What remained was thin and careful, the voice of a man who has realized he is negotiating from the floor. "Sir, please, 7 years. We have never missed a payment, not once, not a single month. I can show you the records. Whatever I did today, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. But please don't end 7 years over one mistake." Chief Emeka was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Was it one mistake?" Biodun blinked. "Mama Taiwo." Chief Emeka did not turn around. He said her name toward the middle distance the way a man says the name of someone he knows is present. "How many times in 9 years has this man spoken to you with respect?" From behind the semicircle came Mama Taiwo's voice, steady, unhurried, with the weight of 9 accumulated years behind it. "3 times, sir, in 9 years." A murmur moved through the crowd. "How many times has he spoken to you the other way?" A pause. "I stopped counting, sir, after the first 2 years." Chief Emeka nodded slowly. He still had not raised his voice. He still had not moved from the position he had taken when he came around the corner, standing, straight hands at his sides, the agbada settling around him like something permanent. "This is not about my son," he said, addressing the corridor as much as Biodun. "My son can handle what happened today. He was raised to handle it. This is about every person who could not." He looked at Biodun directly. "The cleaner you sent away from your door because she was blocking your entrance when she was doing her job. The security boy you complained about because he asked a customer to move their car, a customer who was blocking the fire lane. The child before my son, the one 2 years ago. Do you remember her?" Biodun's face went still. 8 years old, Chief Emeka said. "Came in with her mother to buy a phone case. You accused her of touching a display screen she had not touched. Her mother came to my management office to complain. I read the report." He paused. "I filed it. I should not have only filed it." The corridor was very quiet. Ngozi had lowered her hand from her mouth. She was looking at her husband with an expression that was no longer entirely about fear of losing the shop. Something older and more private had surfaced in it, the expression of a woman revisiting things she had chosen over the years not to look at directly. "Get up," Chief Emeka said to Biodun. "Please." Biodun rose. Slowly, with effort, his knees leaving 2 small impressions in the dust of the tiled floor that would be swept away by morning. Chief Emeka looked at him for a long moment. "You will receive written notice of termination by tomorrow morning. 30 days to vacate as per the agreement. The security deposit will be forfeited." He turned to Emeka Jr. "Process it tonight." "Yes, sir." Biodun closed his eyes. Beside him, Ngozi made a sound that was not quite a sob compressed, swallowed the sound of a woman who has decided she will not perform her grief in front of this crowd. Chief Emeka turned. He looked at the assembled faces, the shop owners in their doorways, the customers, the people who had come down from the upper floors, the man who was still recording at the back of the crowd. "The rest of you," he said, and his voice carried without effort to every corner of the corridor, "have my gratitude for your patience this evening. Adeyemi Plaza has been here for 22 years. It will continue to be here. The standard of conduct I expect from tenants toward customers, toward workers, toward children, toward anyone who walks through those doors has not changed. It will not change." He paused. "If any of you have concerns about how you or someone you know has been treated in this building, Emeka's office is on the 3rd floor. The door is open." Then he turned to Mama Taiwo. She was standing at the edge of the semicircle with her arms still folded, her head tie still slightly crooked, her face carrying that compound expression, vindication and compassion, and the particular dignity of a woman who has been right about something for a long time and has not needed anyone to confirm it. "Mama Taiwo," Chief Emeka said. "Sir, your rent, 6 months, waived effective immediately." He said it without ceremony, the way you say something that is simply correct and requires no ornamentation. "Emeka will update your account tonight." Mama Taiwo unfolded her arms. She pressed both hands flat against her chest over her heart the way a person does when a feeling becomes too large for the body to organize in any other way. Her mouth opened, and no sound came immediately. Then quietly she said, "God bless you, sir. God bless your son." Chief Emeka nodded once. "God bless your bread," he said with the small, precise warmth of a man who delivers kindness without theater. "I have been buying it for 20 years. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, surprised, genuine, the kind that breaks tension the way rain breaks heat, and in the middle of it, Mama Taiwo finally let herself cry. Not dramatically, just 2 clean lines down her face that she wiped with the back of her hand before anyone could make much of it. Chief Okafor had not moved from his position at the back of the crowd since his name had been said. He stood now with his arms at his sides and his senator outfit slightly rumpled, and his face arranged into an expression of cooperative neutrality, the expression of a man who has calculated that the best available strategy is to be as unremarkable as possible for the remainder of the evening. Emeka Jr. found him with one look. "Tomorrow morning, sir, 9 o'clock, bring the arrears." Chief Okafor nodded. "I will be there." "All 3 months," Emeka Jr. added without looking up from the folder. Another ripple through the crowd. Chief Okafor adjusted his collar and said nothing. Lawal had been standing beside his father through all of it. He had not spoken since his words to Biodun. He had simply been present, watching, absorbing, filing it all away with the careful attention of a boy who has been told many times by a man he trusts that this is how you learn what things are really made of. Now, Chief Emeka placed a hand on his shoulder and leaned slightly toward him. "Are you ready to go home?" he asked quietly. Lawal looked at his father. Then he looked once more at the corridor at Biodun, standing hollow-faced beside the door of the shop he would vacate in 30 days at Mama Taiwo, wiping her face at the crowd beginning to slowly loosen and drift at the recording phone at the back that was still blinking red. "Can we stop at Mama Taiwo's stall first?" he said. "I didn't get to finish my groundnut." Chief Emeka looked at his son for one moment. Then, for the first time since he had stepped out of the Land Cruiser, he smiled. The video was online before midnight. Someone in the crowd nobody ever confirmed who had uploaded the full recording to Facebook at 9:47 p.m. under the title, "Store, Owner Slaps Landlord's Son in His Own Plaza, Lagos." By 11 p.m. it had 4,000 views. By the time Lawal sat down to breakfast the following morning, it had crossed 40,000 and was still climbing. Lagos woke up angry. The comments arrived in waves: first the outrage, then the jokes, then the deeper conversations that social media occasionally permits before collapsing back into noise. People who had never set foot in Surulere knew the name Fashola Electronics by 8 a.m. People who had shopped there some for years shared their own stories in the comment threads. A woman wrote that Biodun had once accused her teenage nephew of stealing a charging cable and made him empty his pockets on the shop floor. A man wrote that Ngozi had told his daughter she could not touch the display phones because she looked like she could not afford them. The stories kept arriving, each one finding the last and joining it until the thread under the video had become something larger than any individual account. A collective memory of small humiliations finally given a place to land. Fashola Electronics opened at 9 as usual. By 9:15 there were no customers. Biodun stood behind his counter in a fresh caftan that no longer looked the way fresh caftans are supposed to look. His face carrying the overnight weight of a man who has not slept and knows it shows, and watched the ground floor corridor through his glass front. People walked past. Some slowed down and looked at the shop with the particular expression of people who recognize a place from a video. None of them came in. By 10 o'clock, his best staff member, the young man in the polo shirt who had stood near the back wall during the confrontation and said almost involuntarily, "It's not here," handed in a resignation letter written on a page torn from a notebook. He set it on the counter, apologized quietly, and left without collecting his outstanding salary. He would rather lose 2 weeks' pay than be asked in a job interview 6 months from now why he had stayed. Ngozi arrived at 11. She had spent the morning attempting damage control, recording a video on her phone in which she appealed to the public for understanding, explaining that mistakes had been made, that she and her husband were deeply sorry that they were human beings with children, and a business they had built from nothing. She uploaded it to their shop's Facebook page and refreshed the screen every 4 minutes. By noon, the apology video had 200 comments. 4 were sympathetic. The remaining 196 were not. She sat in the back office of the shop and did not come out again. The termination notice arrived at 2 p.m., delivered by hand in a sealed envelope by a man from Adeyemi Properties Management Office, who asked Biodun to sign for it and waited while he did. Biodun signed. The man left. Biodun placed the envelope on the counter beside the till without opening it, as though leaving it sealed preserved some version of reality in which its contents were not yet true. He opened it 20 minutes later. 30 days. Security deposit forfeited. Unit G01 to be vacated and returned to the landlord in its original condition, fair wear and tear accepted by the date specified. Any items remaining on the premises after the vacancy date would be treated as abandoned property. He read it twice, folded it carefully, put it in his breast pocket. Then he picked up his phone and began calling commercial property agents about available retail space in Surulere. The first agent recognized his name from the video and said the available units he had were already spoken for. The second agent said the same. The third agent did not answer. He called back 4 minutes later to say with professional regret that his current listings were not quite the right fit. Biodun put his phone down on the counter and sat in his empty shop in his good caftan, surrounded by phones and laptops and accessories arranged with the aggressive neatness of a man who had until yesterday considered his shop a reflection of his own importance, and looked at the glass front through which the corridor continued to move without stopping. Across the corridor and 2 units down, Mama Taiwo's stall was having the best Thursday of its 9-year existence. The video had sent people to the plaza not to gawk at Fashola electronics, or not only that, but drawn by the story, and finding in the story a woman who had stood up in a corridor and said a child was sitting on those steps doing nothing wrong, and you walked over and hit him. That is everybody's business. People came to buy bread. They came to buy chin-chin and groundnut and puff-puff. A food blogger with 40,000 followers posted a photo of Mama Taiwo's stall with the caption, "If you're in Surulere today, you know where to go." By 3 in the afternoon, she had sold out of everything except 4 loaves of bread she was holding back for her regular evening customers, and she was on the phone with her supplier arranging an emergency restock. She handled every customer with the same unhurried warmth she had always had. She did not mention the video. She did not perform the role of the brave woman from the story. She sold bread. She gave change. She tucked extra chin-chin into bags without being asked. When people said, "We saw what you did," she shook her head and said, "I only said what was true." And then she gave them their change and turned to the next person. By 5 o'clock, 3 other shop owners on the ground floor had quietly submitted written complaints to Adeyemi Properties Management about Biodun's conduct. Over the years, incidents they had witnessed, grievances they had filed in their own private memories and never formalized. Emeka Jr. received each submission, logged it, and added it to a file he had begun building that afternoon. Chief Okafor arrived at the management office on the 3rd floor at 9 the following morning, as instructed, wearing a less elaborate outfit than usual and carrying a bank transfer receipt for 3 months' outstanding rent. He sat across from Emeka Jr. with the posture of a man who has decided that cooperation is now his best available position. Emeka Jr. reviewed the transfer, issued a receipt, and noted on the account that any future arrears exceeding 30 days would trigger automatic termination proceedings. Chief Okafor nodded at everything and left. He did not stop at Fashola Electronics on the way out, the shop that had once been the corner anchor of the ground floor. The largest unit, the glass front that ran floor to ceiling, the sign in bold red letters that said, "Quality you can trust," sat mostly empty through the rest of the week. A few customers came in who had not seen the video or did not connect the name to the story. Biodun served them with diminished energy, the motions of a man going through a routine whose purpose he has temporarily misplaced. On the 5th day after the incident, a woman came into the shop, looked around and said to Biodun directly, "Are you the one from the video?" Biodun said nothing. The woman nodded slowly, set down the phone case she had been examining, and walked out. In the stairwell around the corner, the same bottom step where Lawal had sat with his water bottle and his separated shoe sole, and his father's quiet teaching pressed against the inside of his chest, someone had placed a small bunch of yellow flowers. Nobody knew who put them there. They sat against the wall, bright and slightly incongruous against the tile, and the cleaners left them alone for 4 days before finally sweeping them away. By then the corridor had already moved on, but some things once placed leave an outline, even after they are removed. The shape of them stays. The step stayed. The memory of what had happened on it stayed. And in the way of all things that are both small and true, it would be repeated at dinner tables in WhatsApp groups in the back rooms of shops on the ground floor of Adeyemi Plaza for a very long time. On the 7th day after the incident, Chief Emeka called Lawal into his study. It was after dinner. The house in Ikoyi was quiet in the way large houses go quiet in the evening. Not empty, but settled the particular stillness of rooms that have absorbed the day and released it. A generator hummed somewhere behind the compound wall. The ceiling fan in the study turned slowly, pushing warm air in a wide circle over the bookshelves, and the mahogany desk and the 2 leather chairs that Chief Emeka kept angled toward each other near the window, not across the desk, because he had always believed that a desk between 2 people was a wall dressed up as furniture. Lawal came in and sat in the second chair. His father was already there, a glass of water on the side table, a folder closed on his knee. He was not in his agbada tonight. He wore a plain white kaftan, slightly creased, the kind he wore when he was not performing anything for anyone. He looked in this light less like the man who had walked through the corridor of Adeyemi Plaza, and more like the man who had carried Lawal on his back during a power cut when the boy was 4 years old, navigating the dark house by memory. "How is school?" Chief Emeka asked. "Fine, sir." "Your mathematics teacher, Mr. what is his name?" "Mr. Adielika. He called me this week, said you've been distracted in class." Lawal shifted slightly in the chair. It was only the first 2 days. "I know." Chief Emeka's voice was without reproach. 2 days is reasonable. I would have been distracted for longer." He picked up his glass, had turned it once, and his hand set it back down. "Are you all right, truly?" Lawal considered the question with the care it deserved. "I think so," he said. "It bothers me less than I expected. The slap, I mean." He paused. "What bothers me more is the other children, the ones before me. The girl 2 years ago." Chief Emeka was quiet. "You knew," Lawal said. It was not an accusation. It was an observation, the careful kind placed gently. "I knew something had happened," Chief Emeka said. "I had a report. I treated it as an isolated incident when I should have treated it as a pattern." He looked at his son directly. "That was my failure, not yours." "Why didn't you act then?" Chief Emeka set the folder on the side table and leaned back in the chair. He was quiet for long enough that Lawal understood this was not a pause before a prepared answer, but a man actually thinking, going back into something and examining it honestly. "Because acting would have required me to be present," he finally said. "To come down from the 3rd floor and walk the building and see what was happening in the corridors. And I had convinced myself that owning something and managing something were the same. They are not." Lawal listened. "You taught me that," Chief Emeka said. "Last Thursday. You've been walking that ground floor for 4 years and you saw it more clearly than I did from the management office." He picked up the folder and held it out to Lawal. "Open it." Lawal opened it. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a 1-page letter on Adeyemi Properties letterhead addressed to Lawal Adeyemi, confirming his appointment as junior observer. A newly created role, the letter explained, which carried no salary and no authority, but one specific responsibility to walk the ground floor of Adeyemi Plaza once a week, and report directly to Chief Emeka on the conduct, atmosphere, and treatment of customers and workers by tenants. The appointment was effective immediately, and would run until Lawal turned 18, at which point it would be reviewed. The second document was a property deed. Lawal stared at it. "Unit G01, his father said. "The corner unit. Vacant in 30 days. He paused. "I am transferring it into a trust in your name. You will not control it until you are 25, but it will be yours. The income from it will go into your education fund." He looked at the folder in Lawal's hands. The first thing you will ever own in that building is the space where someone told you that you did not belong. Lawal did not speak for a long moment. He looked at the deed, then at the letter, then at his father, the plain white kaftan, the creased sleeve, the glass of water, the man who had built 22 years of something without putting his photograph on any of it. "Thank you, sir," he said. And then after a pause, "Can I still come in my school uniform?" Chief Emeka looked at his son for one full second. Then he laughed, a real laugh, unhurried and unguarded, the kind that fills a room without trying to. "You can come however you like," he said. "That is rather the point." 3 days later, Mama Taiwo received a visitor at her stall. She was in the middle of wrapping bread for a customer when she looked up and found Emeka Jr., standing at the counter with a sealed envelope and his customary expression of professional neutrality. "From Chief Adeyemi," he said. She finished wrapping the bread, gave the customer their change, and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet. Adeyemi Properties letterhead. A brief paragraph confirming the 6-month rent waiver she had already been told about, and below it a second paragraph she had not been expecting. Upon expiry of the current tenancy agreement, Mama Taiwo's stall would be upgraded to the adjacent unit G03, twice the floor space of her current position, at the same monthly rate she had been paying for 9 years, locked in for a further 5 years by the attached addendum. Mama Taiwo read it twice. Then she set the letter flat on her counter and pressed both palms on top of it the way you hold something down when you are afraid the wind might take it. "Tell him," she said to Emeka Jr. without looking up. "Tell him I will pray for his son every day for the rest of my life." Emeka Jr. nodded. "I will tell him, Ma." He paused, and something in his expression shifted very slightly, a small relaxation around the eyes that was as close as he ever came in working hours to being moved. He already knows. On the last day of the 30-day notice period, Biodun Fashola vacated unit G01. He did it early in the morning before the plaza opened with 2 hired hands and a rented truck. They carried out the glass display cases, the shelving units, the stock the sign from above the door. Fashola, electronics quality you can trust, last of all. The sign was heavier than Biodun remembered it being when they put it up. It took both hired men to lift it, and one of them scraped his hand on the doorframe. They loaded it into the truck with the rest of the things and drove away before the first shop owners arrived to open their doors. The unit was left clean. Swept floor, no marks on the walls beyond the ordinary evidence of 7 years of occupation. A small rectangle of slightly less faded paint above the entrance where the sign had hung. Emeka Jr. walked the empty space that afternoon with a clipboard and conducted the inventory check as the tenancy agreement required. He noted the condition of the floor tiles, the state of the electrical fittings, the absence of any items left behind. He signed the form, dated it, and closed the folder. Then he stood in the middle of the empty unit for a moment, in the space that had been the largest shop on the ground floor, with the glass front running floor to ceiling, and the afternoon light coming through it in long, clean bars across the bare tile, and looked around at it the way you look at a space that is about to become something else entirely. In his inside jacket pocket was a set of preliminary drawings from an architect Chief Emeka had engaged the previous week. The new tenant for Unit G01 had already been confirmed a community learning center free of charge to children from the surrounding neighborhoods, funded entirely by Adeyemi Properties, equipped with books and computers, and a small reading corner near the window that faced the corridor. It would open in 90 days. Lawal did not know about the learning center yet. His father was saving it. Some things Chief Emeka believed were worth the weight of a good reveal. The learning center opened on a Saturday morning in October, 93 days after the vacancy notice was served on Unit G01. Chief Emeka had not made an announcement. There was no banner across the plaza entrance, no invitation sent to the press, no social media post from Adeyemi Properties. The only indication that something was happening was a handwritten card taped to the glass front of the former Fashola electronics unit 3 days before the opening in neat block letters, Adayemi Community Learning Center open to all children free of charge, Saturdays and weekdays after school. By the morning of the opening, word had traveled anyway. It always does. Lawal arrived at 7:30 an hour before the official opening time in his school uniform, gray trousers, white shirt. The ink stain near the second button finally faded to near invisibility after his mother's third attempt with the scrubbing brush. He had taken the bus. He had paid his own fare from his weekly allowance. He carried his faded navy bag with the electrical tape repair on the buckle. He stood outside the glass front and looked in. The unit had been transformed. The glass display cases and commercial shelving were gone, replaced by low bookshelves along 3 walls, filled with books arranged by color as well as subject. Someone had understood that children are drawn first by what they see. There were 6 computers on a long table against the back wall, each with a chair that could be adjusted. Near the window that faced the corridor, the same window where Lawal had once stood looking at a pair of wireless earphones and been watched by a man with narrowed eyes, there was a reading corner. 4 low armchairs, a small rug in warm orange and brown, and a floor lamp that glowed soft gold even in the morning light. On the wall above the reading corner in large painted letters, "A quiet river runs the deepest." Lawal stared at the words for a long time. He had not told his father about the sentence, the one that lived in his head, the one he heard in his father's voice even when his father had not spoken. He had never said it aloud to anyone except Mama Taiwo in the stairwell on the afternoon of the incident. And Mama Taiwo, true to her word, had not repeated it. He turned. His father was standing behind him. Chief Emeka was in his plain white kaftan again, the same one from the study, or one exactly like it. He had arrived without the land cruisers, without the security detail, without Emeka Jr. and the leather folder. He had come alone on foot from the small car he had parked 2 streets over, because today was not a day for arriving. Today was a day for being present. "You painted it," Lawal said. "You said it," Chief Emeka said. It belonged on a wall. They stood together, looking through the glass at the reading corner, the orange rug, the gold lamp, the books arranged by color. After a while, Lawal said, "You could have told me what you were planning for the space." "I know," his father said. "Why didn't you, Chief Emeka, looked at the painted words above the armchairs?" "Because I wanted to see your face when you read it." He paused. "Was it worth the wait?" Lawal looked at the sentence on the wall. His sentence, his father's sentence, the sentence that had traveled from a private study to a painted wall in the corner unit of a ground-floor corridor in Surulere, and felt something settle inside him that had been slightly unsettled since the afternoon of the incident. Not the anger. He had never really had the anger. Something quieter than that. The loose end of a thing that had needed to be tied. "Yes, sir," he said. The doors opened at 8:30. 11 children came in the first hour. By noon, there were 24, ranging from 7 to 16. Most of them from the streets immediately surrounding the plaza, children who passed this building every day on their way to and from school and had never had a reason to come inside. Mama Taiwo sent over a tray of chin-chin and puff-puff at 11 o'clock, carried by her youngest daughter with careful hands. A volunteer teacher from a secondary school 2 streets away had agreed to hold a reading session every Saturday morning, and she arrived at 9 with a canvas bag of picture books and the organized energy of a woman who has decided that this matters. Lawal spent the morning in the reading corner, not supervising, not performing the role of the landlord's son, the boy from the story, the reason the space existed. He sat in one of the low armchairs with a book he had brought from home, a collection of African short stories his literature teacher had recommended 3 weeks ago and read. when a younger boy, perhaps 8 years old, came and stood at the edge of the reading corner looking uncertain. Lawal looked up and said, "You can sit anywhere. All the chairs are free." The boy sat. He picked up a book from the shelf nearest him and opened it to the middle. They read in companionable silence for 20 minutes. 5 years later, the Adeyemi Community Learning Center marked its 5th anniversary on a Saturday in October. By then, it had expanded to include the adjacent unit. The space had doubled and operated 6 days a week with 3 regular volunteer teachers and a small paid coordinator funded by a grant that Chief Emeka had quietly arranged through a foundation he had established in the 3rd year. Lawal was 19 years old. He stood at the front of the room in a plain white shirt and dark trousers. Not a suit, not an agbada, just clean and pressed and present, and looked at the children filling the chairs on the floor and the reading corner where the orange rug had been replaced twice and the gold lamp was still the original. 41 children had come that morning. The youngest was 5, brought by an older sister. The oldest was 17, a regular who had been coming since the 1st year and was now helping the younger ones with their reading. There was no microphone, no prepared remarks. Lawal had written notes and then left them at home because his father had told him once that the best things you say are the ones you already know. He looked at the painted words above the reading corner. Still there. 5 years of mornings and the paint had not faded. A quiet river runs the deepest. "My name is Lawal Adeyemi," he said. "I used to come to this plaza every Thursday after school to buy groundnut and look at things I wasn't sure I could afford yet." He paused. "I still come every Thursday. I still buy groundnut from Mama Taiwo." A ripple of laughter from the children who knew Mama Taiwo the way all children in a 2-street radius knew Mama Taiwo. "The only thing that has changed is that now when I walk through those doors, I walk through them knowing what my father taught me." He looked at the room. "He taught me that what you own means nothing if you don't know how to treat people, that the world will show you its real face when it thinks you have nothing, and that the way you respond to that face, not with anger, not with performance, but with patience and memory, and the quiet certainty that the truth will arrange itself eventually, that is the thing that lasts." He stopped. "This room is not here because of what someone did to me," he said. "It is here because of what my father believed a building should be for." He looked at the children in the chairs, the books on the shelves, the morning light coming through the glass front that had once belonged to a different kind of place. "Come every Saturday. Bring someone who hasn't come yet. Read everything on those shelves." He smiled. "And if anyone ever tells you that you don't belong in a place, remember that belonging is not given by the loudest voice in the room." He picked up his bag. It is built quietly over time. He walked to the door, stopped, turned back once. "My father also says a quiet river runs the deepest." He looked at the words on the wall, then at the room. "I have been thinking about that for 5 years. I think what it means is this: the things with the most power are often the things you cannot see from the surface." A pause. "Be a quiet river." He walked out into the corridor. Mama Taiwo was at her stall, the larger unit now, Unit G03. Bright and full and smelling of fresh bread and groundnut oil and the particular warmth of a place that has been loved consistently for 14 years. She saw Lawal and raised her hand. He stopped at the counter and pointed to a small bag of groundnut. She handed it over, tucked in a piece of chin-chin without being asked. He counted out his money and paid. Then he slung his bag over his shoulder and walked through the ground-floor corridor of Adeyemi Plaza, past the shops, past the stairwell, past the bottom step where a boy had once sat with a water bottle and a separated shoe sole, and his father's quiet teaching pressed like a stone against the inside of his chest, and out through the glass entrance doors into the Surulere morning.